Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Hannah Fry. I'm with Family Source Consultants, and today we're going to talk about the ins and outs of the matching process. So I have an expert on the subject with me today. Megan, can you go ahead and just jump right in? Tell us a little bit about your professional background and your role here at Family Source.
Absolutely. Well, like you said, my name is Megan Cox. I am one of the match specialists here at Family Source Consultants. I have been involved in kind of like the social service mental health world for close to 10 years now, and came to Family Source to work in mental health as well as with our intended parents and our surrogates in the matching process. So my role here is to kind of help facilitate that matching process and help with the match meetings and get everybody connected so that they're ready to move forward into case management and on with the rest of their journey.
Perfect. And it is quite an undertaking that you have in your multifaceted roles. So for folks who are watching this live, we'll be live for about the next half hour or so, but just as a heads up, if you put any questions or comments you have right in the chat, we'll be able to go ahead and answer those live in the next half hour. So don't be shy, ask any questions you've got, but I've got plenty for you as well, Megan. So if we can just get started with kind of the early stages. So what happens before matching? I understand there are profiles that need to be filled out. So what types of things are folks looking for in the profiles?
Absolutely. So yeah, one of that biggest piece of getting you ready for matching is making sure that those profiles are together, ready to go, pictures added, information. And I feel like Family Source as a whole does a really great job of making sure that those profiles encompass everything to answer questions before they're even asked. So it's funny, I had an intended parent just recently tell me, like, the profile was so all encompassing. It was so comforting to read all of that about our potential surrogate prior to scheduling a match meeting. They were just going on and on about how much info is in there and how grateful they were for those bits and pieces that they didn't even think that they would want to know about a potential surrogate. So I think that's really, great to know from both sides, from a surrogate side and from an intended parent side, that those profiles are really all encompassing and give a great background. And so that's kind of the prior to matching, making sure those profiles are in order, ready to go, in depth, give answers, make sure they give kind of a little light into who you are and really portray your voice and what you and your family, or as a surrogate, you and your family are about. So from both sides, it's really just about getting those pieces ready. Obviously, from a surrogate side, there's more with the surrogate intake process and all that, getting ready for matching. And from the intended parent side, getting that ready to go and kind of knowing what your preferences and your expectations are in terms of moving forward with a potential candidate.
Yeah, I think so it all really starts with the profile, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then who's reviewing the profiles? Like, who actually receives the profiles? Is it the intended parents who are reviewing, or is it the surrogates?
Yeah, so both. When we go to do some, profile sharing, when a surrogate is ready to match, we start that sharing process. And we will basically swap profiles. The surrogate will get to review the intended parent profile. Same, the intended parent will review the surrogate profile and be able to ask any questions, follow-up questions to what is presented to them, and get answers to those questions in order to decide about moving forward with the match meeting. And there's always the option to ask to see another profile, to pass on a potential profile, or to say, I would love to meet them. And there's still, after a match meeting, is the opportunity to decide whether that was the best fit for you or not. So nothing really gets set in stone until after that match meeting and everybody decides to move forward or not at that point. But, you have kind of those two layers of getting to know the other side through their profile and through the match meeting.
Now, I think a misconception out there, at least this was a misconception that I had before I became a surrogate myself, was that there's kind of just this database, and once you're accepted, you just get to scroll through and pick whoever. So I understand that it's a little bit more tailored to making sure that we're quite literally making matches happen. So what criteria is our match team looking for in determining whether or not a profile would be sent to someone?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the surrogate side, the surrogate's going to lay out her preferences for, for her journey, for her intended parents, what she envisions that looking like. And that can get quite specific in terms of, how far does she want to travel? Obviously, the basics like her termination stance, her willingness or unwillingness to vaccinate against COVID. And then there's obviously the, health of the surrogate and previous pregnancy history and her age and her BMI. All of those things kind of go into determining what intended parents will qualify, for matching with that surrogate, whether it be based off her preferences or her medical history and the fertility clinic that those intended parents are with. So I frequently talk about it in terms of buckets. There's these 3 buckets of criteria. So we're going to look at the surrogates criteria, the intended parents criteria, and the fertility clinics criteria. And all 3 of those need to align, in order for a match to be successful and in order for it to be considered. And certainly, I always like to look at hard criteria versus preferences. I never want to withhold profiles or withhold an option based off preferences. I want you to be able to explore that whole profile, look at the candidate as a whole, the big picture view of it, and be able to determine if you want to move forward. I think that gives a lot of power back to our surrogates and our intended parents in terms of making these decisions. So it's great to, know what the hard lines are. Certainly, I don't want to present anything to anybody that they're like, that doesn't even come close. But I certainly want to be mindful of what is, a preference that maybe you might be willing to consider when you read the whole profile and kind of see some of the other positives that there are to see in the various candidates. So there's a lot to look at, and a lot of, understanding and knowledge of all pieces to make sure that we are making, like you said, a good match and that it is tailored.
Yeah, I think that's also a great point about it's really a comprehensive process. And so what you are looking for on paper, but I know for me, again, I was a surrogate myself, and I went in to the whole process thinking I would love to help a gay couple specifically. That was my intention. That was what I thought. And then I received a profile actually after speaking with a case manager about what I was hoping for from a journey, where she said, you know what, I think this couple might be a really, really good fit for you. They met a lot of my other criteria. And I'm so glad that we were introduced, because that's the couple that I ended up caring for. They were not a gay couple, so they did not match on paper what I thought I was looking for. But then when we met, I mean, the vibes were perfect. We had, great, communication and great sense of humor and things like that you can't capture from an application. So
absolutely. And I think that's such an important point. Like, it really, nobody knows what to expect if you haven't gone through a journey prior, as an intended parent or a surrogate. You don't know what you don't know. You think, you have this idea, and it's so great to just be able to review everything and look at it big picture wise. And just like you said, that's a perfect example of finding something that you liked that you weren't even sure that was going to be for you. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sure that happens all the time in your world. So we've gotten a few great questions from folks who are watching. So someone's wondering, when does the match process actually start? So determining, and I know you've kind of been speaking to looking through profiles and finding out if it will be a great match, but before the files even happen, there's an application process for both surrogates and intended parents. So can you speak a little bit to like the very, very, like, how does anybody even get started here?
Absolutely. So for a surrogate, she's going to go through our gestational carrier intake process. So she'll submit an application. She'll have an intake call with one of our surrogate intake specialists. They will, talk to her about the process, give her all of the information. There's phase 1 and phase 2 of our intake process. So in the, first part is kind of that introductory signing, the paperwork and getting, requests out for medical records and things like that. In phase 2, that's going to be like reviewing of the medical records, making sure everything's in place, getting her profile together. Once she is approved for matching and has gone through all of those steps, that is when the matching process will begin for a surrogate from her standpoint. So that's when she might see her first intended parent profile, and get to start reviewing profiles at that point. From an intended parent point, that's going to be coming from our intended parent intake side. They're going to meet with one of our intended parent intake specialists and talk to them about the whole process, decide, which route they would like to take for their journey in terms of different service levels available through Family Source and what they're looking for. Once they sign on with Family Source and get all of that in order, then they go ahead and they come over to Match. They get introduced to the Match team as a whole. They will have a specific contact person who will keep in touch with them throughout the matching process. But at that point, we will make sure that their profile is ready to go. And for intended parents, it really is about finding that match and what that looks like. So that time frame can vary for what that looks like from sign-on date, signing on with Family Source and coming over to the Match team to when they'll see their first profile. It varies from intended parent to intended parent, but that's kind of what that process looks like up front for them.
Perfect. So then they match, or they at least are interested in having a match meeting. So that would be the next step then. And we did actually have someone comment that I would imagine, are a surrogate. They have their match meeting tonight with intended parents. So they asked specifically for any advice. I know, I was going to say, you might be on that one too. But
I think I'll be there.
Yeah. So she's asking for any advice, which I want to hold on the advice piece until the end, because I think this whole session essentially will be great advice. But going into a match meeting, what are some questions? We'll start with surrogates. Questions that surrogates should consider for asking their potential intended parents.
Yeah. I think, kind of some of the most important pieces to make sure from a surrogate. Now, I say this, we have a nice, long, beautiful list of questions that I make sure that we cover, that we go through. We talk about all of these different pieces to make sure that everybody aligns and feels comfortable about making a decision moving forward. But outside of that, I think it's most important for surrogates just to consider what is most important to them in their journey. Is it going to be your relationship throughout the pregnancy? Is it what post-pregnancy communication looks like? Kind of some of those most important pieces to you as a surrogate is going to be important to know upfront coming into that meeting, so that you ensure that you get the appropriate amount of information from your intended parents about what those pieces are going to look like. Of course, those pieces are talked about throughout the match meeting. We have, like I said, my list of questions that we go through and talk about. But I think just kind of knowing, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, what you're willing to consider, what is up for discussion. I think just having some of those things thought out in advance. Some of the questions we talk about that I think catch some people off guard are, breastfeeding and pumping after pregnancy. If that's something you're open to or willing to consider. I think another thing that catches some people off guard is we talk about social media and your comfort level in what is shared on social media and what is not shared. I think those are probably like the two big ticket items that most people don't think of prior to the call. But outside of that, I just really think it's important, just like I said, to know what is important to you and what you want most out of the journey, so that you can talk to your intended parents about that.
Mm-hmm. And I think you brought up a good point too, just backing up a bit, who attends the match meeting? Who should be there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the intended parents, obviously, and the surrogate and her partner, if she has one. And then you'll have a facilitator, which will be one of our matching specialists. So for example, for tonight, it's me. So I will be on that match call, and we help facilitate. We help fill any voids in the discussion, but we also allow you all to have a conversation. It's important that you guys feel comfortable, that you get to know each other, and that I try my best not to make it feel like interview style. I want you guys to feel that comfort level. But in that same breath, I'm not going to let anybody feel awkward either. I'm gonna hop in and help facilitate and make sure that everybody feels comfortable and ready to make a decision about moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's nice, I think, to have that third party person there to kind of alleviate some of the awkwardness, because some of the questions are kind of, personal a bit. And so instead of the surrogate, I know, being like, so how do you feel about terminating pregnancy? Like,
exactly.
You, as the third party, these are very important topics that I think need to be discussed up front, but you can be the one to raise those questions. So
yeah, exactly.
That's helpful. And then also, I know what kind of surprised me a bit was that partners attend as well. So it's not just the surrogate. If the surrogate has a partner, it's typically expected then that their partner attends, because they're very involved in the process too.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. So then during the match, how long do match meetings last?
Typically I'd say to plan on an hour. I feel like that is the typical go-to. Some go a little shorter. Some I've had marathons before, but I would say the typical is about an hour.
Yeah, that sounds fair. I do liken it to, I mean, you said it shouldn't feel like an interview in like a vibes kind of way, but at least from like a scheduling standpoint, it's not totally far off. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I get a lot of people comparing it to a first date. It's like the awkward vibes of having to generate some conversation and ask some uncomfy questions. So I think that is probably one of the most typical comparisons, is that it feels like a little bit of that awkwardness of a first blind date, maybe.
That's got to be so funny as the third party then, what, essentially like attending a blind date, but you're not wrong.
Exactly.
It's funny. So in the match meeting then, I understand that they have some opportunity afterwards to decide. Like nothing's decided in the match meeting. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We say, please don't answer on the call. We want everybody to feel like they have the opportunity to get off, talk to their partners, obviously, in a environment where there's not people watching them make decisions. So we ask everybody to hold off on giving answers. Now, sometimes certainly you have some people who are like, oh, we're so thrilled, we're so excited, let's move. And the excitement gets the best of them, but certainly we ask that you hold off. We do ask for a response. We send follow-ups immediately following the match meeting. So the intended parents will get a follow-up from their point of contact, and the surrogate will get a follow-up from her point of contact. And we do ask for an answer within 24 hours. And obviously we encourage you to ask any other questions if there's more questions that pop up. If you're anything like me, you might think of 5 more things that you're like, oh, I should have asked that during the call. Please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out with any more questions. But we ask for a response within 24 hours because we're mindful that the other side is probably anxiously awaiting what the decision is. And we just want to be respectful of everybody's emotions during that time as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great, though, that yes, there's obviously pressure on the match meeting. Like you can't get away from that, but it isn't pressure of like, at the end of this hour, you're going to need a decision made, or if you have more questions, like you can't. So keeping that door open to kind of have some discussion after, I think is really important. So
absolutely.
That's perfect. So if everybody says, okay, yep, let's do this. We're all on board. What happens from there?
Yeah. So if everybody says this is great, then we get all of the surrogates' medical records and information sent off to the fertility clinic. And that's kind of when the pre-approval process starts. So the clinic will review all of her records in their entirety and make a decision about, on paper, does she, seem to be a fit to move forward with a gestational carrier arrangement. Now, obviously, we do everything in our power to make sure that that's going to be a yes. We have the fertility clinic's, preferences and what they're willing to work with and things like that. So we go ahead and we get all of that sent over to the fertility clinic for the pre-approval. And at that point, once pre-approval is obtained, then we transition all of the individuals over to their case coordinator. And that case coordinator will see them from medical screening all the way until baby is here. So the medical screening, legal clearance, and transfer, typically I say we estimate about 3 to 5 months from match date to transfer date. And again, that can vary just depending on how quickly we can get her flown out for medical clearance, depending on the distance, how quickly the lawyers go back and forth with the, contracts and the legal phase and all of that. So there's some wiggle room there, but our typical estimate is about 3 to 5 months.
Perfect. So they go straight into medical screening things, and then contracts typically would come after that.
Yes. Yeah.
Makes sense. And that's essentially the first time that they travel as well, right? So if they need to travel to a different state or anything for the clinic specifically, they would be going for those medical screenings and things.
Yes, medical screening and then transfer would be typically, for most clinics, the 2 times that they would travel to the fertility clinic.
Perfect. Now, what if during the course of either contracts or medical screenings, let's say they don't pass the medical screening, what happens then? Yeah.
Well, so it really depends from the surrogate's side. It really depends what the reason was why they didn't pass medical screening. If it's something that is very clinic specific, we might look at rematching her. If it's something that is, going to be clinic wide, then certainly, unfortunately, that might be the end of the road for her surrogacy journey. And from the intended parent side, they would come back to matching, where we would welcome them with open arms to help them locate another candidate that would be a better fit for their fertility clinic and for their medical screening process.
Mm-hmm. And then we just had a great question come in that kind of speaks to this broken matches idea. So if a match is broken during those kind of pre-approval processes, so they've matched, but now they're getting approved and things like that, do those profiles go to the back of the line, or if something comes up that seems like a really good fit, can they get slotted in?
Yeah, no, there is no back of the line. There is no line. So
Right.
certainly no, they wouldn't go to the back of the line in terms of not being considered again. Certainly if there is another candidate that is appropriate and ready to go, we certainly would look at rematching, our intended parents as quickly as we can.
Right. I think that's a fantastic point. It's really much more of a pool than it is a line. So there isn't like an order to things. It's quite literally finding the right fit for whoever's
Absolutely.
available.
Absolutely. And if there's one that aligns with those criteria, certainly, intended parents that have been with us for a long time, we're certainly going to look at those ones as, I not in a line sense, but in terms of if they've been with us for a long time, we're certainly going to look at those intended parents, quickly if we have a match available for them, one that fits their criteria, and all those things line up, certainly.
Mm-hmm. And we did just have I think a really great comment come through that I want to speak to, because they suggested that maybe it should be the other way around, where medical clearance happens before the matching, so there's not disappointment after matching. But can you kind of speak to why that isn't the case?
Yeah. So, some fertility clinics have fees associated with those things, and the traveling and the money that it costs to fly a surrogate for a medical screening process and things like that would all have to be paid up front. And if it wasn't even a candidate that you ended up wanting to move forward with, that's money that is out of pocket then. So I think it's important, to find that match, make sure it's a good fit, ensure everybody has met, and get moving forward before we move forward with that medical screening.
Mm-hmm. And also to clarify, like, there is some initial screening that happens. So
Absolutely.
A surrogate wouldn't be matched if, for example, she doesn't have children. Like, you have to have given birth before in order to qualify to be a surrogate, and that's a clinic-wide thing. So all clinics will require things like that. Or if she's too young or too old, like that will be, there's a few kind of wiggle roomy things like that on age. Some clinics will have a few different guidelines, but things like that are already kind of filtered out. So anybody who's making it to matching has, at least on paper, met the general criteria. And then from what I understand, each clinic will have its own criteria as well.
Yes, most clinics provide us with, some basic criteria to, be able to go off of. These are pregnancy histories that they're willing to work with, that they've had success with in the past, so that they're comfortable moving forward with a candidate maybe who had hypertension in one of her pregnancies, or had gestational diabetes in one of her pregnancies, things like that. They let us know that information. Most clinics do up front. So we know that ahead of time, and certainly, if it's something they wouldn't work with, we wouldn't share that particular candidate with a intended parent that works with that fertility clinic.
Right. Yeah. And again, there's no way to completely medically clear someone unless you know what clinic the intended parents are working with, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a big part of it. Somebody had also commented that BMI can be clinic specific. I know there's some guidelines on that, and different clinics will have different guidelines for you. That's something that I really liked about Family Source, that we get a lot of inquiries from potential surrogates that are like, well, I had hypertension, or I had, preeclampsia, but it was just after, and it was just a little bit, and I wasn't medicated. And do I still qualify? And I think I always tell people just to start asking and start the process, because you really never know until a doctor says yes or no. And some different clinics will have different, risk factors that they're willing to consider. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, so all of that happens and they all make it through. Let's say that there's a surrogate who wants to go on a second journey. Then what, does the match process change? What happens from there?
No, so it's pretty similar. She would just essentially reapply. Once she's ready for her second journey, she would reapply. Ideally, she did her first journey with Family Source, so we already have her records on file. So that kind of cuts down on the timeline in terms of getting her ready to match. But we'll get her fertility clinic records from her first journey as well, so that we have those on file. And we'll go ahead and get her started in the matching process. Now, fertility clinics do have, some guidelines in terms of how long from her last birth to an embryo transfer. So depending if it was a vaginal delivery or a C-section, it could alter what that time frame looks like. Some clinics will do a transfer after 6 months. Some want more, 12, 18 months, just depending again on whether it was vaginal or C-section.
And then for intended parents, if they are going on a second journey with us, do they start over in the match process? Is it up to them if they start over?
Yeah, so some intended parents sign on for their second journey before their first one is complete. Others wait until their first journey is finished before they start their next one. So that's really up to them. We in the matching team, if they want to, kind of get them the ball rolling at the same time, we would just connect them with their intended parent intake person who helped them through the process originally and help them get signed up for that second journey. If it's after the fact, their case manager or case coordinator that helped them in their journey will kind of help them get signed up for that second journey as well. So really is up to the intended parents when they would like to start that piece.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Are there any parting words of advice that you would give to, let's start with intended parents going into matching?
Oh, words of advice. I think, the matching process is, one of the most, the whole journey. I'm not even gonna say the matching process. The whole surrogacy journey is a test in patience and being able to adapt to the whole journey. And this is for surrogates as well. It really is. I hate the word journey, and I say it more times than I wish I did, but it really is the best description for what this is, because there is no, from point A to point B. There is always going to be twists and turns and hills and valleys, and all of those things just need to be navigated. So I think my, just parting words of advice for both sides would just be, to have a open and optimistic mind about the entire journey and just be, ready to go with it. There's a lot of different pieces, and I think it's important to know what's important to you and just kind of stick to that and follow your heart and follow your gut on this whole process. And that would probably be my just biggest piece, is just be ready for the journey. Just expect the unexpected and be ready for the twists and the turns.
I love that advice. And I do know, I mean, there is a match for everyone. So I know I've worked with surrogates before that are like, I am really uncomfortable getting vaccinated. I don't want to do that. Will I ever find intended parents that are okay with that? And the answer is yes. And then on the flip side, there are surrogates who are like, I have to be vaccinated. That's really important to me. And I need to find intended parents that are okay with that. Will I ever be matched and find someone? And the answer is yes. So wherever you stand on some of these, hot button issues that are really important in the match process, I love that point of just, trust your gut, stick to what your values are, and you will find someone. Of course, if you have a lot of, specifying qualifications, then it'll take a bit longer, but I mean, there is that match for everyone, I believe. So
there 100% is a match for everybody. And we in the match team, I can speak for the whole team. We do our best to find that one person that is just going to make everybody excited to the point where they don't want to wait after a match meeting and they want to say, yay, 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 and move forward. So, it happens for everybody. There is a match for everybody.
Yeah. And you'll know it is so much like dating. It's kind of one of those, it when you know it sort of things. And if your gut's like, I mean, they seem great, but I'm not sure. Like, listen to that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
On either side. So,
absolutely.
Well, Megan, thank you so much for explaining the whole match process from start to finish and then some. If folks do jump off this webinar and then come up with their 5 more questions, like we talked about earlier, how can they get in touch?
They can reach out. If you're a surrogate, reach out to our, GC intake. There's the inquiry on our website. Intended parents, if you're in the match process currently, reach out to our match team inbox. You get in contact with any of us. So we're always here to answer any questions at all.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Folks watching, if you have any additional questions, Megan just gave you all the information about where to reach out, and we would love to speak with you more. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.